My name is Paxton. I live here in Arkansas, South Central Arkansas, really humid, really hot. And Katherine is in Southeast Alaska, way far away from Arkansas on Wrangell Island. So two completely different climates. And we've did a video talking about that before, kind of the details of what we're doing and where we're headed with our farm operations. So we're having a conversation today about crops that we grow for homestead use, for our own use, things that we grow for market to sell, and if some of that overlaps. And we're going to have a pretty broad spectrum here.
And also, we should say, you're eventually talking about having a kind of, you're doing a test market garden right now, but eventually you're going to have something kind of go in Alabama. So when you're doing that, what are you looking at as far as what do you want to grow for yourself to feed yourself versus what you want to grow for market?
Okay, and most of the homesteady stuff will happen in Alabama when I make that transition because I'm really limited on space here. But in Alabama, I'll have pretty good bit of space to my disposal, actually as much as I can deal with. But what it's looking like now and what I've played with in my test market garden for selling is really a lot of greens, lettuce, and salad mixes and things. I don't know yet because I haven't tested the market, but I suspect that I'm going to have to branch out. And I hope that I do branch out farther than that. But if you guys are familiar with people like Curtis Stone with their crop rating things, it'll be as much of the high value stuff as I can get, obviously. And so that would be radish, salad, turnips, tomatoes, maybe. Maybe some of the sweet peppers, but most of it will be really short turnover stuff, such as greens, radishes, and a few root crops. And that's kind of it on that. And since I'm going to be Alabama, by the way, where I'm at is going to have about the same climate as here. So I have sort of that same spectrum of stuff, but I plan on working my way gradually into it. But there's some stuff that just doesn't fit in a market garden, like winter squashes. I'm going to do a lot of those. And I do that now. And these are things that I've tested.
And that's
And
more for
probably
you, right?
this is all for me.
Yeah.
And some of the stuff that would overlap, one of the big ones that I'm thinking about, and Catherine's doing this really well right now, and it's sort of made me think about it more, is like carrots, big time market garden thing. Although you're growing them, you would grow them differently for market probably than for storage. You're basically just letting them sit there longer.
Right.
These are, so there's a few things like that overlap. Turnips actually is something I'm looking at now, but I haven't seen how well I can use them as a food staple. But you might grow that in the market garden, but I definitely want to play with it as a storage crop. For most of the stuff that I want to grow for myself is going to be stuff that's really high calorie and slow growing things. And that's sort of what prohibits it from being the market garden stuff, right? Like
Right.
the winter squashes take up so much space. I've looked at corn, like I've got these right here. I eat a lot of corn grits, y'all, and I can live off of these things sort of kind of because I eat them a few times a week.
Right.
Really high protein, really high fat. And I've grown corn before. I've just never grown it for that purpose, and I've never processed it. So there's a whole big learning curve to a lot of the things that I'm doing that I haven't tried yet. And that obviously that'll evolve if I raise certain things and they don't pan out. I'll mix certain stuff, and I'm continuously reading seed catalogs and listening to permaculture people, and I'm finding out about all these annual things that you can eat and live off of. Catherine was talking about beans before we came on. Beans go really well in the South, and most of the legumes like pea, cow peas, stuff like that, really, again, really filling high protein stuff that you could live off of.
So you're thinking about
Yeah,
kind of growing some of those too, like some beans, like dried bean type beans.
dried beans
Yeah.
is, yeah, and I should have been specific about that because I'm really into storage stuff, and the beans are an easy one if they're dry. You know, you got them in a
Right.
jar.
Yeah.
And so things that can carry me through the shoulder mumps and through the winter. And like I said, I understand nutrition a little bit because of where I work, and I'm always shooting for high protein and high fat things. And this is something maybe we can touch on a little bit.
Right.
Some of this for me is to get better food for me,
Right.
and the experience growing it myself just for the thrill of it. But obviously, since the COVID's hit and stuff, I'm not exactly a doomsday prepper. I don't
Yeah.
know how realistic that is,
It's made me think a lot different too, actually.
but if we have enough stuff to get us through, say, a rough 2 weeks, when everybody
Right.
goes and buys bread and milk,
Right.
whenever bread and milk is the thing you go buy when you panic,
Or frozen pizzas here in Alaska, right?
frozen pizzas and a butt wipe.
It's
But
all
anyway,
gone.
but anyway, if you could get through that 3 week window with your stuff,
Right.
not only is that a relief, but it's sort of an adventure. It's sort of fun because I did have some frozen meat and I did have some storage vegetables when this crap hit, and it never
Right.
got to that, but
Yeah.
it felt good to have it there.
That's how I felt too with all my, tubs of, grains and beans and stuff. I just felt like, yeah, I felt like if it went for 6 months, I'd be all right, and it feels
Well,
like, it feels like having stacks of wood, for the winter for your fireplace. It just feels like I'm going to be okay. Yeah.
okay, so you had that much stuff sitting around
Yeah.
that you were good.
Yeah. Being here in Alaska and the shipping being kind of weird, you at least want to have kind of a month. And, it's smart to have a few weeks in case the barge doesn't,
Yeah.
um,
So you're continuously in a kind of a prepper
I
situation
I
anyway.
am seriously, that's my mindset. So yeah, I have tubs of well, I mean, I could talk about that later because that's kind of what I did was when I was thinking about, our conversation today, it's like, well, what do I have and what of that could I grow, what I'm growing now, but what could I grow and what's reasonable to grow versus like I should just buy a bag of rice or something, and ship it up
Yeah.
here or whatever. And that'll last me a year or whatever. So yeah, so I mean, I guess I could go ahead and talk about the stuff that I'm growing. You're talking about really kind of focusing on like winter squash and maybe some corn and some other things like that. So what were the things that for staples for you?
Winter squash, the corn, and specifically for grits, because that's mainly how I would eat the corn, and legumes. We all,
Right,
no matter
right.
where we're at, we
That was the
eat
one.
beans, peas, or
Yeah,
something, and there's a reason for that. Like these are the things that, well, actually, if you think about it, the three things that I'm talking about is the Three Sisters thing that
right.
the Native Americans did, and
Yep. I'm interested in some of those things too, but I'm kind of, limited as far as what I can grow up in this climate. And so for me, the real staple would be like potatoes. And in the past, I kind of thought, well, I'll grow some potatoes and have them for storage. But that when you were talking about how when the pandemic hit, I kind of started thinking to myself, yeah, it'd be nice to grow a lot of potatoes and have those
yeah,
around because they grow well here. I could store them. I was even thinking as I'm, you know, experimenting with storing carrots out through the winter in the garden, that I
mhm.
was thinking, I could store potatoes out there too if I didn't have a big storage area. It'd be kind of a pain
And
in the butt to dig them out, but I've been able to do it, you know. I can actually grow and store those here. But as far as like, what else I'd like to grow for me, that's realistic, uh, you know, definitely also potatoes and leeks, which has been working out good. So if you want an onion type of thing, storage onions, they kind of probably want a little bit of drier protected area. I mean, getting them wet is probably not going to work, but I have a friend here in town who has a high tunnel and she had good success growing storage onions in that. It got warm enough and then they were dry enough and she was able to cure them and stuff like that. But that's kind of a little bit harder, and so leeks is kind of more realistic for me as far as an onion. And then I want to grow, like I eat a lot of berries, and so I'd like to have blueberries, blackberries, raspberries eventually if I could. And on really cold summers, they don't probably aren't going to produce that great, but that's something I'd like to have because on the good years they do produce, and I'd like to have those. And those are kind of real, staple type things for me. And something I thought about, before was like, well, I don't really want to grow garlic because it takes up a lot of space, and it's not like a kale where you can just take the leaves off and it keeps growing,
Yeah.
and so. But I've had problems getting some decent garlic sometimes, and sometimes it's been really expensive. So now I'm kind of thinking, I'd like to grow my own garlic, get it somewhere, and I could have control of the curing of it so that maybe be good quality and store for longer. And so maybe garlic is really something I want to do. And so that's what I've been kind of, okay, potatoes, garlic, leeks, carrots because they store, and trying to grow the kale and seeing how that does through the winter and things like that. But as far as like for the market, obviously I want to grow some of, I'm not going to grow potatoes and even leeks, I don't think, and definitely not garlic for the market. That would just end up being for me. But the things that I want too is like during the summers, I want salads, so I wanted the salad greens, the lettuces, the baby greens, and stuff like that. And the herbs, I love to have basil, and parsley, and I'd like to expand my herbs eventually, and have more of that. And the having the little cucumbers, and I'd like to eventually have, a few plants of like little cherry tomatoes or stuff like that. But I don't think I'm going to sell cherry tomatoes. But the things that I can sell, salad mixes, kales and chards, herbs and things like that, and so like you said, some of that overlaps, but definitely for the subsistence type of thing, I'm starting to focus more on that. And I would have thought more of myself as like selling things more for the market, and now I'm almost thinking more of myself as growing things more homesteady, and then having definitely salad greens and carrots and kale and chard to sell, but maybe more focusing on me, type stuff.
For me and you, the way that we think about this is kind of a lot different because one of the climate, and then on top of your climate, you're on an island, so shipping is such a thing. So it changes how you do the math on what you actually want to grow, because
Yeah.
even though you're able to sell stuff and you're probably able to sell it at kind of a premium because you're on the island, you're paying a premium for the food. Where
Right.
pretty much here, if I'm not really particular about the vegetables, I can buy pretty much anything at any time. And since I'm down here in the lower 48 and want the pretty much one of the biggest growing regions, I can find whatever. It's pretty
Right.
safe. And far as saving money, it's not a big deal.
Right.
Uh, but I was wondering, like, when you look at it and you're thinking about you're evaluating if you're going to grow something, and it sounds like we're both on the same page. Like, first, it's easy to grow, or
Right.
how easy is it to grow a bunch of this to make it as something for me? And then, am I doing it because I can't buy this stuff fresh or good, or am I doing it for fun, and so on and
Right.
so on? And
Right.
uh,
Yeah,
what
I kind of went through, like, maybe we can start talking about that now, is that, the things that maybe I'd like to grow, but it's really hard, or for whatever reason, and some things that I've just decided I'm just not going to grow, even though I'd maybe like to, either climate or whatever. And I kind of put down a few reasons here, made a few notes. Um, so like, for example, things that I'd like to grow that are hard to grow. Um, like a lot of the reasons is like, for me, like you said, I can't get it, or if I can get it, it's not necessarily fresh, or because it comes all the way up here, it ends up being really expensive. And so there's a number of different things that play into that, when I'm making that decision. And so, like, during the summer, cherry tomatoes. Uh, well, there's a couple of reasons with that. Like, there are some summers that they just won't even, they're not going to do very well. You'll just have green tomatoes or whatever. But on good, decent summers, which we sometimes have, I'd love to have a couple of cherry tomato plants just to have tomatoes for a salad. But it's like, we go through like a lot of salsa and things like that. I've sometimes thought, is it worth getting all these individual jars of salsa, or would it be good just to ship in some tomatoes during the summer when they're nice from Oregon and chop them up and make salsa and can salsa. And so there's things like that because I've thought about like, well, am I going to, in my limited space for my garden, grow cabbage for sauerkraut, or do I just buy a couple of cabbages, and cut it up and make sauerkraut? Or maybe because it's just a few plants, maybe I should just grow a few cabbages and for my sauerkraut or something like that. But yeah, so like tomatoes, I could grow a few tomatoes. Um, Mushrooms. I watch your videos and I am just always so jealous. And I know that we have mushrooms around here. And if I was a better mushroom hunter, that would be cool to do that. But because we do have mushrooms around here, but I would like to do like you've done and grow them like on some logs and have some mushrooms. I don't eat a ton, but I would love to have some. And
Well,
yeah,
oh, I was wanting to talk about that because I'm
yeah,
really into that, um, and actually talking about you doing it, I had been looking back through. I've got like the magazine here that I order my spawn from.
right,
This is Field and Forest, but like Paul Stamets has fantastic fungi, and there's some good companies out there, and they have the listing of the trees that you can use. These are log grown mushrooms, if y'all don't know, but where you're at, y'all, you have aspens because one of the things you were worried about is tree species where you're
right.
at, and you do have aspens, right?
We do not have aspens. We have alders,
Oh,
we have
oh yeah,
hemlock, we have spruce, and we have cedars. But I was also thinking that even if some of those mushrooms don't grow on that wood, I could just get a piece, somebody to ship me up some logs. I know that'd be maybe a little
yeah,
expensive, but if I wanted like something's got to, I want this mushroom and it's not going to grow on anything we have here or something.
yeah. And the alder you could, I think, is on the list.
Okay.
But and for me, it's been a really worthwhile thing because that's the other thing living here is really diverse tree species,
Right.
and I love this. Like this is so far, this has turned into one of my favorite, what could be a homestead thing, and I've got a lot of use out of it. And I eat mushrooms like constantly. I
Right.
could eat them once a day. I would eat them
I can
once
see
a
them
day,
coming
and
out your ears.
yes, pretty much. And so, what's so cool about it is you inoculate these logs and you put in the work at the front end. And when it's really raining and wet and this nasty weather, you're not going to harvest. The garden's kind of kaput,
Yeah.
and that's when I'm getting these killer harvest of mushrooms. And now I'm starting to figure out like I've got this here too. These are wild, but I can put them up. These are dried. These are you
Yeah,
probably can't
you
see
did
it.
that video on the wood ears, right?
Years,
Yeah.
yeah. And so that was easy. Those kind of Mother Nature did that one for me. But the shiitakes, I keep leaning more and more towards those, and they're super easy to dry. And even though they would be easy to store, and they rehydrate, they reconstitute really good. And I don't know how much nutritional value they have. So looking at it in terms like that, I don't know. But
Right.
you can make something really plain like the winter squash. You can make that pretty good
Right.
with the mushrooms. And so I've really nerded out on it. Like I'm keep showing books and stuff, but like it's helped me bring several nerdinesses together, kind of. So
Right.
like you have the different trees. So I got my tree book, and
Right.
because of the mushrooms, I have the mushroom Bible thing there, and we're both really outdoorsy people, like
Right.
nature people, and it just brings all that together because now I'm nerding out on all of these trees. And when I get situated in Alabama, one of my big goals is and this sounds kind of terrible the way I'm saying it, but take advantage of natural disasters, not in a
Right.
negative way, like, but we have in North Alabama, we have all these strong storms, different times of year, it's different things, and there's busted trees everywhere, and they're in the roads and all this, so they have to be cut out.
Right.
I'm good with a chainsaw.
Yeah.
Feel like I could capitalize on that and have a lot of mushrooms fairly easy, and I'm getting better at it. And I see it as sort of a marketing thing. Like I could sell it for good money,
Yeah.
but it would be more about if you did occasionally have the mushrooms, I think people would gravitate towards your stand or whatever, like
Right.
it would
In
set
addition
you
to, it
apart.
makes you special compared to other
Yeah.
sellers. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I remember when I worked at the food co-op in Port Townsend, we used to have people wildcraft mushrooms, bring them in and we'd sell them. It was mushroom season. It was really cool. And the other thing I've been thinking about too is just like I really would love to have salad greens and like herbs like basil during the winter. So I would definitely want to set up a kind of a grow area where I can have enough. I would love to eventually not have to buy lettuces and baby greens in the wintertime from the store.
Well,
That would be super cool. But that is another thing. It requires building a space and setting that all up and the expense of the lights and all that. But
wintertime stuff would be only for you, Catherine, only, not.
absolutely. I'm just not thinking about, yeah, so much more of my garden during the summer is going to be for me, and the wintertime stuff would just be for me. I mean, it's possible that I might expand at some point, but I just don't really see that. I don't really want actually the gardening to take up my whole life. I have other things
You
I'm
want a
interested
break.
in. So if I, I'm going to be busy enough, because I've thought about should I do starts in the spring and sell vegetable starts to people. I mean, there's all sorts of things a person could do, but it's kind of like, no, I don't really want to do that. But it's interesting
Well,
because, yeah, when you had talked about like what are the things that make me think I want to ship the stuff in rather than growing it myself. And one of the things is like, so for example, I talked about potatoes. They're usually relatively inexpensive, but I can't
mm,
normally get organic potatoes in town. They don't sell
yeah.
them at the stores, or they're poor quality, like they're already sprouting and they feel like smushy balls or something. And sometimes the ones that I even ship in the boxes of potatoes that I'll get, they won't taste very good. They won't be a very good potato. I also worry that I order a 50-pound box of potatoes and then it's all sprouting. And so like unless I have my very own sales rep like I used to when I did buying for the store, I can't say,
Yeah.
hey, man, don't send me sprouty potatoes. And then like the shipping weight they're really heavy. 50 pounds shipped cold, chill is expensive to ship. And so I kind of, that's why like potatoes, if I could get like inexpensive potatoes that were really nice all of the time, I might think about not buying or not growing so many potatoes. But then of course then the pandemic made me start thinking maybe I should have a staple
Yeah.
subsistence type crop. And garlic was the same thing. I used to think, no way am I going to buy or grow garlic. It takes up this whole bed, like I can just buy it at the store, but I can't get garlic at the regular stores. I can't get organic garlic. The garlic that I could get sometimes is like it's sprouting. It hasn't been cured very well, or it's
Yeah.
been stored such that it's not gonna. And sometimes it doesn't even taste that good. Like it's not a good, or it's like the little tiny cloves. And so I don't know. So I've decided, and we eat a ton of garlic. That's the other thing. We eat a lot of it. So I have decided, for right now, that's another thing I've decided that I thought I'm not going to grow, that I am going to focus on growing. But yeah, so that's kind of some of the things. And like you said, like I would love to grow. Like I would love to have, I talked about berries. I would love to have fruit trees here and have like an apple tree and, maybe a cherry tree and stuff like that. And there are people in Southeast Alaska who grow apples. So it's possible. And I may, in the end, in a few years, plant some apples, apple trees, but it's like, where am I going to plant them that they're not going to get drowned? How long, I'm old, how long is it going to take for them to be mature and whatever? And then the apples that grow around here, the ones I've tasted anyway, are just not as good as the ones you can get from Washington State. And typically,
Yeah.
you can get good apples. Unlike potatoes and things like that, pretty consistently you can get a nice box of apples. And they're not usually that expensive. So it's worth if I had the storage, which eventually I'd want storage for my other stuff anyway, a walk-in cooler space. I could just buy a bunch of apples and store them. And because we go through a ton of apples, that's the other reason, we go through a ton of apples. And so, but like, yeah, as far as like beans, I would love to be able to grow and have some of my own beans. Or like, wouldn't it be cool? I eat oats for breakfast every morning,
Oh,
to
I
have
forgot
oats.
about
But
it.
like, it's like, where am I going to do that? And how they would have to stay dry. And it is so wet here. And, so it's kind of, it probably makes sense, since I can get good quality dried beans and grains, to just ship it from somewhere in Oregon or Washington State or whatever, and store them. They store really good and they're inexpensive, and just keep them in my tubs and always have them around. But I may play with trying to grow like a bean that would be dried or something. So I may kind of fiddle with some of that. But then, things like, even like, I can't grow corn here. In a greenhouse I could. It just totally doesn't make
It
sense.
wouldn't make
Yeah.
sense.
And even things like broccoli plants, like you said, like the winter squash, things that grow really big and take up a lot of space. Does it make sense? Should I just buy some frozen broccoli, and then just focus on kale, and, get the frozen corn and the frozen broccoli or whatever. But yeah, those are, and storage onions too. I mean, really, I could probably grow them, but they're cheap. They're usually good quality, and they keep. And I could just buy some boxes from down south.
I'm looking at the storage onions. Before I disregarded them, I've tried to grow them, not knowing what I was doing. Like, I didn't do my research back then, and I sucked at growing the storage onions.
Right.
Uh, and they are cheap. I do go through a bunch of them, but I'm watching. I actually don't watch it that much, but it's a great channel and great farm. I actually met the dude one time as a Honey Tree Farm. I think the guy's name's Casey, and him and his wife do it. I think they're awesome farmers. But anyway, they're doing high value crops, but they've kind of mastered the storage onions to where it almost fits in that bracket. and
Right.
and but they have a full basement and stuff, and they're storing it, and they've turned it into a big market thing. And I don't know if I would ever do that. It's tempting, but that's sort of a whole nother rabbit hole, and it's my least
Yeah.
favorite right now.
What
But
would you not? What would you decide? Like, I'm not going to grow it because, and why?
there's not a lot because, as you've seen, I'm pretty distracted. So more, if I don't grow something, it's because I've disciplined myself.
I
Uh,
love it.
but but I have a different situation too.
Mm-hmm.
From you, as also as I'll have access to land. You're on an island, and
Right.
and basically a lot of it's bog. Like, you have to go for this
Yep.
major effort to grow space. In Alabama, there's land, and I have land of my own. My father has land, and probably I have access to other land if I do start growing things and they look good.
Right.
Chances are I can get that easily enough. And so the perennials, there's not much that I won't
Right. So
try
you're
except
going
for
to
the
have
citrus.
apple trees and pear trees and cherry trees and whatever.
And it may look like a train wreck, and I'm sure it will,
Nice.
but I'm cool with that because if you have land, you have land. You're either going to bush hog it and take care of it, or it's going to grow up and look like crap.
Mm-hmm.
If it is grown up and it's apple trees instead of shrubs, does it matter?
Right.
I don't think so. And
Yeah.
I will tell you, neglected plants, although they look like hell, you can go out to them and they will produce if you can dig through the jungle. This stuff, to me, it's worth doing it if the space is there. And in Alabama, I have probably an acre or so of growing space, more than I'm on a market with, where my dad's land is, which he's told me, plant stuff on it.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a lot of, like, 12 acres of land, but there's like two 2 acre blocks. So it's like 4 acres. That's really would make good orchard ground in that. And, if he does give me turn me loose on that,
Right.
there's a lot I can do with it. And I've really went down the rabbit tree hole. I figured out how I can do this cheap and possibly make money at it, either with the fruit or propagating my own trees.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something I want to put on my channel a lot when I get to Alabama, because I think people should see the whole apple tree thing, like making your own apple trees and stuff. I'm saying this and I haven't tried it yet, but I've really watched a lot of content on it, and I think it's doable. But
Right.
you I don't think people should be afraid because the trees are like $30 and $40 online. You do the math and you buy
Right.
the rootstocks and the scion wood and do it that way. You can do them cheap. I think I could do it cheap enough to sell a few trees.
Right.
Uh, and this is something I'm really passionate about with the apples and pears. They're similar in how you would grow them. And last few years, I've just been turned on by all kind of fruits because I met people who have the trees, persimmon trees, nut trees,
Right.
so on, so on. And to me, it's a long-term plan. It's you're going to plant landscape plants or trees or whatever,
Right.
perennials. Why bother with a crepe myrtle or a rhododendron? That
Right.
stuff's great, but mix in something you can eat.
Yeah.
And I've actually some of the pear trees that I planted in Alabama when I moved here to Arkansas, totally neglected because obviously I wasn't going back. There in my mother's backyard, she put a house trailer on that place, and I think it was last year, she told me that there's a pear. I planted them in twos
Right.
down through there, and they were these pears, and they were like this big around and like that long, and
Right.
the tree just broke over. And this was zero anything. The
Yeah.
trees, they just weren't cut down. That's all I did for them.
Yeah.
So it's something that's really, yeah.
So you're gonna grow
Go ahead.
fruit. You're looking at growing some fruit trees and stuff. But are there things that you're just? I mean, so like you said, the only reason you wouldn't grow something is if you
Yeah.
were you
Well,
had
sorry,
disciplined
I got-
yourself not to.
I
But like, what are
derailed.
you trying to not make yourself not grow? Because it's not worth it.
Okay, grains. And
Yeah.
I'm not ruling that out completely, but it's
Yeah, I know,
at the
man.
bottom of the
Oh, I want to
list.
grow some oats.
But actually, as easy as the plan is to grow, the whole processing thing is the curve that I don't want to get into.
Yeah.
And space, and I feel like grains are not that crop that you
Right.
can forget about. The winter squash is going to climb its way out of a hole of bushes and
Right.
weeds. The grains, if it's weedy,
Yeah.
you've probably lost the fight. And
Yeah.
that's one. I love citrus. Most citrus won't grow. It's like we're borderline. We might could keep one alive, but it's not worth the BS
Right.
to mess with it. So grains,
Grains, citrus.
strawberries are one I want to play with, but they're kind of a pain. People grow them really well here, but it's a whole other learning curve.
Yep.
I'm on the fence about asparagus. It takes
Yep.
actually on the fence about growing it for me even, but then at the same time I thought about doing enough for like selling a little bit. So I'm at both ends of the spectrum on some of this stuff.
Right.
Same thing with strawberries. Like one part of me says it's not worth the crap to try to grow them, but then if I did do them and I somehow figured out how to do it with these, yeah, I would probably try to sell some then. So that would be
Right.
the other end of that. And there's so many variables, stuff I haven't tried. Yeah, so there wasn't much, just grains and some of the harder to go fruits. And I won't go way out in the left field, like pawpaws. I don't know if you've
Right.
seen them. I've never even eaten them. And then some stuff that I can't buy here, like the gooseberries, the cape berries. I eventually want to try that.
Right.
Last year or so, all sorts of nuts, hazelnuts up to say pecans or things. Oh, and that is one thing that I kind of don't want to grow, even though I just said it. Or there's a bracket of nuts, a family, I guess, and it's like black walnuts are the worst, but apparently most of the walnuts have this problem, like English ones even, and then pecans. I can't remember the name of the compound or the chemical, but it takes oxygen out from around the tree.
Oh.
Basically, it's a competition mechanism for the tree.
Right.
So I've actually considered cutting down and established like an old black walnut tree that's in the backyard right behind where my mother has her trailer now. And that's painful, but where that tree is and where its root system is actually right about where I want to put my high tunnels or my,
Right. Right.
yeah, poly high tunnels. And what do? I get every other year, it's kind of a biennial, masses and masses of black walnuts, and that is by far my favorite nut.
Right.
But they grow everywhere. They grow on the sides of the roads in that part of Alabama. So,
Right. No,
and
I
that's
know.
a big
Yes.
thing.
Sometimes you have to just make those hard decisions and just say, you know, yeah, like this
Yeah.
is where the light is and this is where I got to put my stuff and that tree's right there. Yeah.
And different people have given me different warnings, like people that I've asked for advice on this whole market garden thing throughout the years. And most of them are saying, you probably need to stay away from that because you're obviously going to get distracted with it.
Mhm.
But the last person I talked to was like Jesse, and it was sort of comforting, but he still like put his foot down on this one thing. As I was talking about perennials, because he had blueberries down here on the lower side of his garden, and he's like, "Yeah, dude, don't start planting perennials." And I was like, "Well, I want them, and you're growing them." He's like, "Yeah." I said, "Trust me, 2 years." He said, "2 years, get your beds in because it's not going to work wherever you put them. You're going to want to rip them up, and then you're going to be all broke-hearted and conflicted whether to tear these things up." And yeah, there's probably truth to that.
Yeah, that there is a point to that because I've kind of changed my mind about where things are going to go, and I don't know though because I think that like if you do stuff on the edges, like where my Hugo cultures are, I figure that's where the berries are going to go, and that's kind of the edges. And so, like, am I really going to change anything at the edges of my area? So I feel kind of safe, but it would be heartbreaking, especially with with trees to have put them in a space that you're like, no, that's really where my garden annuals need to go or something.
And
Yeah.
your space makes sense like that too. But to be fair, you've done what, 3 or 4 seasons there, and
Right.
nothing's moving. It might grow,
Right.
but the beds
Yeah.
are there. They're
Yeah.
not moving for perennials, at least not
Yeah.
now.
Yep. Yeah.
So since you've started growing and you've gotten good at some stuff, are you a food snob now? Like, has the more you grow, the better you grow? Does it turn you into a straight up food snob, or how does that change, Jim?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I want to turn that around and ask you after I'm done answering it. I I don't know, like I've been able to get access like to a lot of really good produce even when I've been up here and I had my little organic produce and grocery store and I shipped stuff up from Oregon, Washington area. I was able to get some really good stuff. Really good tasting stuff. The hard things were the things that didn't keep well, like baby greens and stuff like that. But I don't know that I necessarily grow stuff that say even tastes as good as some of the stuff I don't know, my carrots are getting better,
Uh,
and the potatoes I've been able to grow have been some of them have been really good. But then I was always able to get good potatoes. So I don't think that I have gotten. I think I was kind of have been spoiled. I've always been able to get good stuff, and I don't know that I grow. I'm such a great grower that I can grow stuff that is so much better than what I. But it does make me the stuff that I can typically. That was when I was running my store. Now the stuff that I can get in the stores that are here that I go to now, the stuff I grow is way better.
yeah.
Because it's mostly because it's fresher, but sometimes it just tastes way better. And I can choose, I want this potato, and they are never going to have this potato. And so, in that way, yes, I think I have. As far as in the position I'm in right now, my stuff's better, and it's so then now I'm a little addicted. Yeah, like I want to grow it now. Like I want my stuff.
When your season spins out, or you're like, wah wah wah.
Yeah, like,
Now I gotta
oh,
eat
well, I
this
guess
crap
I
again.
don't get basil anymore. So now I had a customer who asked me for a little start of basil from my greenhouse at the end of the season. So I potted that up for her and got it for her. And I thought, that's a good idea. And I potted one up for myself. I'm still eating on that basil. It's growing really
Oh,
well under lights. if I had done 6 of them, I could have basil every week. Now I can't, so I can't have it every week because I didn't grow
Yeah.
enough, and I don't have really the space to grow it right now. But yeah, and so now I do. Yeah, it's nice to be able to have, and so that's what's gotten me thinking, no, gosh, it would be so nice to be able to grow my own greens. And so yeah, I have gotten to the point where, hey, it's worth it to put this effort in to get the stuff that I can grow so I have good stuff.
There's two things. I'm a food snob, and that's why I brought it up. So some of the stuff that I can think of, like the little white cucumbers that I grow
Yep.
out on, for one, I don't know if I've ever bought a cucumber because I just don't, the grocery store ones don't do it for me.
Yep.
Uh, but those and people, that's one of the things that my friends stuff, I share that with them, and they'll say, like, his cucumbers, that's where it's at.
Right.
Because you can smell them, like when you're eating them, we eat them like an
Yeah.
apple, and you can just smell the, and that's, it's not normal for a cucumber so much. Like
Right.
you just had the store thing. Garlic, we both grow garlic.
Yep.
The stuff that I grow is the fire. It's
Yep.
really good. And I can't, far as I know, I can't buy the green garlic, which is the best that I can. You grow leeks, and maybe
Right.
I could if I tried harder, but I
Right. So
can
you're
grow the
eating the
garlic.
garlic greens, and it's not like you can just go to
Yeah.
the store and get that. Even in the place where you're at, where there's lots of food, right? And
Yeah, because I
variety.
don't
Yeah.
think many people know about it, and it's more of a foodie thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I go to Little Rock to the foodie stores, and I'm like, why are they not carrying this? Because
Yeah.
to me, that's next level stuff. I really
Yeah.
like that. Trying to think of, there was one other thing I was thinking about. The greens that I grow are way better because,
Yep.
again, this is not because you can't grow it here, because obviously you can, and you could do it way better than me, I'm sure. But we have like a Walmart or whatever local, and even with the Whole Foods and stuff,
Yeah.
their greens they're shipped from California a lot of times, and they're not that great, and
Yep.
it's the price, you're looking at it and it's got wilty crap in there, and like,
Yeah, so it's
yeah, can't do
interesting. Like
that.
you have said that, hey, I'm on an island and dealing with the quality issues and all this stuff. But you're in
Yes,
some ways you're in the similar, and
I am.
anybody anywhere probably well, maybe somewhere in like California where you're right next to a bunch of little local farms, and you go to a farmer's market. That's probably different. But a lot of people, even if they're in an area where there's lots of variety, it doesn't mean that you can get everything, and it doesn't
That's
mean that
exactly
everything
right.
that you can get tastes that good, or that's keeps that well because it's wilty or whatever. Yeah.
And I'll point that out. I guess there's a stereotype, or it's a misleading one that people might get, because where I'm at in Arkansas is it's really flat, so it's row crop country. So
Right.
if you asked me where I was at, I would say, oh, I'm right in the middle of all of these crop fields. So obviously there should be lots of crops, but it's all monoculture,
Yeah.
subsidy crops, I think is what they call them. This is soybeans, the rice,
Corn.
the whatever. And
Yeah.
they're actually, because of that, you see a lot less home gardens here than you would say in Alabama, where the biggest cornfield where I live would be like a 40 or maybe 100-acre field of corn.
Right.
Where here, that's not
Right.
even, that's a joke here. Like 100
Yeah.
acres of corn would be a joke.
Yeah.
And so, and it's more difficult to grow it here too, because this is all chemical based farming, and the stuff drifts. I've talked about that before, but
Yeah.
it's kind of a pain. And yeah, in a sense, I am in a food desert. Uh, and some of it's so crazy. And this is, I guess, going back into why I want to do certain things. So I love Asian pears.
Mm-hmm.
And I know for a fact, because I saw them in Alabama, that Asian pears are very doable here in the South. Like, if people knew about it, it would probably be, the trees would be obnoxious, like they would probably yield and you couldn't give them away.
Right.
But nobody grows them, so I go to Little Rock and buy them, and my God, they're high. And I'm thinking, for one, the damn pear is probably shipped from California, where they had to pump water to it because it's
Yeah.
dry. They could actually grow that thing here probably way better. Now, they would have fungal diseases and things to contend with.
Right.
But when I heard of an Asian pear, I saw a tree in Alabama. I actually thought it was a weird looking apple,
Right.
because they're shaped like apples.
Yeah.
And I still do this, by the way, but I've just stopped. went down the driveway and knocked on the door, and I said, "Hey, look, the apples are falling and stuff. Would it bother you if I picked them up?"
Right.
And you'd be surprised how much stuff I freeloaded like that.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah, 'cause I don't know if you remember, I had like 2 sacks of persimmons.
Yes.
I'd get that every year. These people give them to me. I made friends
Yeah.
with them, but
Yeah.
so stuff like that. But anyway, these people, they didn't know about growing fruit trees. They bought this on a whim. That's where I found out what the Asian pear was.
Right.
This thing was loaded, and nobody knew what they were. And she's like, "Yeah, we eat 1 or 2." And I'm probably talking like if you had 5-gallon buckets, probably somewhere between 5 and 10 5-gallon buckets pull off of this one tree in their driveway.
Right.
And now when I see them for like $3, $4 a
I
piece
know.
at Whole Foods, I'm like, what is going on?
I was going to say, I used to bring those up for the store, and they're so expensive.
Yes. But they're awesome.
Yeah.
But the word to the wise, if anybody's watching this and they want to be like a freeloader like me, when I did that,
I think it's called gleaning,
oh, okay,
not freeloader.
Gleaning or foraging,
urban foraging.
Yes, if you do that, and I didn't always do this, but sometimes with that case in particular, my grandmother was still living, and I picked these things off, and I brought them down there, and I was showing her, and she's like, "That's really nice." And we were still unsure about what an Asian pear was. So she was telling people like, "Yeah, he brought home this thing. It's an apple crossed with a pear." We didn't know what it was, but she preserved some, and she made killer pear preserves and stuff.
Oh, wow.
She did like caboodles of them. And
Right.
then she's like handed me a pine or two, and she's like, "Go take that to them people." When I did that, those people said, "You're locked in every year. Come
Right.
get them. Don't even tell us to stop and get them, and bring us a jar of the stuff."
Wow.
And,
Yeah.
and that stuff works. People grow food, and
Right.
that's something we're talking about, the whole homestead thing. I think people shouldn't think, "What can I grow on my place?" I mean, you
Yeah.
should grow all you can, but look around you and see if people's got stuff, and maybe talk to them.
Right.
If I have 5 pear trees and you don't have the space, but you're growing these killer greens,
Yeah.
like we were close,
Yeah.
there's no need in me growing that stuff.
Right. And so
There's
that
no
kind
need growing
of that
pears.
kind of gets to your thing about walnuts. Like you said, I could just chop down this walnut tree that might actually be detrimental. It's in the place where it's not supposed, where I want to put my other stuff, but they grow everywhere else so I can get them. So that's going to play into your decisions. Like maybe I don't grow maybe I just plant one apple or Asian pear tree, and because I know I can always get it from these folks or something like that.
And I've had a few instances like that. The mushrooms, while I'm in Arkansas, it'll be a little different in Alabama, but for the mushrooms, I did oysters the one year.
Mm-hmm.
I won't grow those anymore because when I'm out wild
Right.
mushroom hunting, the oysters are everywhere. Shiitake is not a native mushroom, and
Right.
it's a better mushroom. That's
Right.
one of the other things.
Yeah,
I
why
turned
grow
snob
mushrooms
about.
when they grow everywhere, but you'd want to grow
Yeah.
some other mushroom that doesn't grow where you're
But
at. Yeah.
shiitake, and so it kills me. It absolutely kills me to buy portobellos now. Like
I
I
know.
almost won't do it.
Right.
But I love mushrooms so much that I have to for the
Right.
summer and stuff.
Yeah.
But you know what really burns you up as you go and you're like, "Man, there's nothing here." And you buy these sorry portobellos, and the next day you go out and there's like acres of chanterelles, and you're like, you're not going to eat the portobellos.
No,
Then.
right. It's like compost bin. Like, I know.
That is so heartbreaking, and I've had that pretty much every time because I have to have mushrooms all of the time.
Right.
So, but now, and maybe this ties into our conversation a little, is you got to know how to keep what you grow.
Yes.
And I've learned how to freeze mushrooms. I've learned how to dry them. You learned how to do your storage crops. You even figured out the kale thing. Like that's not a storage crop, but it is now for
Right.
you.
Yeah, yeah, and I've got to perfect all these things, but it's some of those things like you said with the mushrooms. If you've got little gaps in the windows of your growing opportunities or your wildcrafting opportunities, then it's like, can you freeze it, can you dry it? And I want to get there with a lot of my stuff too, whether it's like with salad greens where I actually have to grow it in a grow room, or whether it's carrots where I can go ahead and store it as long as I have a tarp over it and the snow's on top of it or whatever. And so I'm working on perfecting those things too, because you're right, that's critical to like the kind of gaps. Like what if once I run out of my carrots, I don't have one started. So I should
Mhm.
have, if I once I have more space, I can get some carrots started in the fall and see it then if they're not going to just bolt to seed, if I can actually get a carrot crop going early enough that I can maybe have like a smaller gap in between my carrot season, and then do I have enough that maybe do is it worth like chopping them up and freezing some, or whatever. But yeah,
Yeah.
that is that kind of that piece of that whole thing that's interesting too.
And I think it's overlooked. And because I think how often have you grown, like you had the plan, you carried it all the way to that point, and then you didn't do what you needed to do
Oh, I know.
to save it. And that's the thing that growers out there and homesteaders, like, yeah, growing the stuff is a challenge, but if you're really going to get into this, you need to learn uh, the next steps to
Right.
finish it off. This may be one of the last things I say about it, but we grow the food for us to eat, and maybe because we like the taste, or we think we'll save money, or we might have food when food's unavailable. But maybe the one thing that's really important to me, and it may not work for everybody else, but mental health, having this, because it's good for your body. So tying that, your nutritional health, into your mental health, and obviously if you're outside just
Yep.
doing it, and it may sound cliche, but it's a real deal for me. Like when I get this stuff out and cook it, it really is it, like in the winter now, it's winter and people have a hard time staying up and not depressed. This is really a good feeling, like,
Yeah.
to me.
Yeah, and I
Uh,
actually like I me too. For me, it's my exercise, it's my being able to be outside. Um and just that, also the mental piece of it is that I have this thing. It makes me feel safer. Like it makes
yeah.
me feel self-sufficient. That's a nice mental feeling. Um but I kind of think that it would be nice to have it's been nice to be able to go out in the middle of winter and get carrots. I mean, it probably looks miserable on video, but it is so cool to me, like I'm digging up these carrots in January. This is so cool. And to be able to
and
get out there and do that even in the wintertime.
and that's the thing about it. There, you probably wouldn't be motivated, and you can probably, I don't know if maybe something you're not comfortable talking with, but what are you on, like year 3 with farming in that plot, or year 4 where you're
Yeah, it was
at?
2018 barely. So 18,
Okay,
19,
so
20, 21 complete. Yeah.
so the winters prior to that, and I'm looking at your winters, and they look freaking nasty. Did you struggle, one, just having the mood for those winter months before this, and two,
Right.
you're talking about the exercise and stuff. I'm guessing that you probably didn't go out and go for a walk or do these things in that really nasty weather. Like, well, when you get a prize out there, like the
Right.
carrots, it's like an
I
adventure
would
where
I would
otherwise,
make myself go out. I have this little bluff where the sun, you can see the sun, like because you can't really see the sun much on our property, and you really can't see the sun much on the island. I mean, because it's behind a hill, and then it comes and it goes over this big island out there. So it's like in the middle of winter, it's up in the sky for maybe if it's up in the sky
yeah,
for 4 hours. If it's not behind clouds. And so
right,
whenever there was a sunny day, which would normally would mean it was well below freezing, I'd go out to that bluff and I would sit there in the sun, and just that little walk out and the little walk back was really helpful. But it has been, to your point, it has been really nice to be able to go out and shovel snow
mhm,
and dig for something, and it's been nice. I have, when I've been out, like, okay, I'm gonna get a couple of weeks worth of something so that I don't have to if I don't really feel like it. um
mhm.
and I think that's been good to have that as a backup. But it has been nice, and I didn't get as many carrots as I could have pulled out of the ground this last time because I thought, it'd be kind of nice to go out and get them later.
Again,
Yeah, so I just left them,
since this is happening, for me, it's more of the mushroom foraging, but as I get more serious about the gardening, it will be there too. But winter time has actually become my more mentally whatever. Like I'm in a better mood for the winter months now than I am for the summer months, because I'm more apt to get out and do these things, and it's a little more adventurous. Where in the summertimes around here are really rough.
Yeah, your summer times are probably more rough, as rough as our winters, maybe. Just on
Yeah,
different ends of the
it can be
spectrum.
brutal, and then the growing can actually be really brutal in the summer.
Yeah, and it can be kind of depressing to see weeds take over or stuff die because it's not getting enough water and all of that.
Did happen this year.
Yeah. So yeah, it's been nice for me to have kind of have some things to pay attention to in the garden during the winter. That's been cool, and I would really like to have a little grow area where I can pay attention to that too. Even if it's in the house, being amongst the plants, it's just nice.
I didn't think about that, but yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah. Hang on a second, the connection is kind of crappy.
All right, y'all. Well, that'll be it for now. Katherine Ivy and Paxton Harper. Check our channels out. We got all videos on all the stuff we've been talking about. And if you're thinking about growing your own food for you or Bill, do it. That's something we can both agree on. So y'all be good. Appreciate y'all.
See you guys
watching.
later.
Bye.
Bye.